as you begin to decide who you should write for, it's a good idea to just have a quick refresher on sort of the most common instruments to have a solo section versus least common. Although in today's writing, I think you see that a lot of bands try to write for the entire band, so anybody could have a solo. A lot of times, remember our sort of first place we should look for who might have a solo is in the tenor 1 part, the trumpet 2 part, the trombone 2 part, and then probably in the piano or guitar parts. All right, those are all likely culprits to have a solo. If you sort of go back to the big band renaissance of the 1950s, you see a lot of solos in those parts. A lot of times, remember, those are the instruments that are closest to the rhythm section, so it makes a little bit more sense. Then it's likely you could see solos in alto 1 or trumpet 4, sometimes trombone 1. Again, we choose those instruments as sort of our second tier, just because I think they're just like a little less common, but each one sort of has its own purpose. Trumpet 4, their chops are usually more fresh than trumpet 2. Our next line of potential soloists would be tenor 2. Probably trumpet 3, although you don't really see a lot of trumpet 3 solos. A lot of times you might see more doubling of first parts than solo things in trumpet 3. Trombone 3, definitely rare, but does occur, especially in some of the great bands like Clayton Hamilton and Lincoln Center. Going back to the saxes, again, it's probably a little bit of a toss-up as to whether you'd see a solo in the Barry part or alto 2 part next, but either one's possible. You rarely see a solo or solo changes in trumpet 1 because a lot of times they're just focused on lead ideas, just like you rarely see a bass trombone solo in the fourth trombone part. Again, this is sort of like the hierarchy of potential solos. For the rhythm section, we see drum solos pretty frequently. We don't see too many bass solos. It's also possible you could write for a double. You could write for flute or vibraphone or clarinet or bass clarinet. And it's also important to note that while I've identified the trumpets as trumpets, that all of those could potentially be substituted for the flugelhorn. So it's also a good idea that any of those could be subs for flugelhorn. So as you're deciding who's going to solo, that's sort of a little bit of a hierarchy of what's sort of the most common to least common, although you can, of course, write for any of those parts.